What if I told you that a young man, born and raised in Africa, would one day rise to become the President of the United States of America? Sounds impossible, right? But here on Tales of Truth, we share stories that prove nothing is impossible when destiny, faith, and perseverance collide. This is more than just a tale. It's a journey of courage, resilience, and breaking barriers no one thought could be broken. So sit back, listen closely, and let this story inspire you. And before we dive deep, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because on Tales of Truth, we bring you powerful stories that can transform the way you see life. Kwame Obiora was born in Lagos, Nigeria, to a middle-class family that valued discipline and education. His father, a strict but fair mathematics teacher, often reminded him that numbers never lied and that integrity was the highest form of wisdom. His mother, a nurse whose compassion was known in their neighborhood, balanced the sternness of her husband with quiet encouragement. In their small but dignified home, Kwame discovered an early fascination with leadership and world affairs. He devoured books about statesmen, freedom fighters, and presidents. Names like Mandela, Nkrumah, Lincoln, and Kennedy weren't just historical figures to him. They were models of courage, vision, and transformation. As he walked through the bustling markets of Lagos, watching the struggles and resilience of ordinary people, he often said to friends, "One day, I will lead a nation that listens to every voice." At 16, an opportunity came that would reshape his destiny. A scholarship to study political science at Columbia University in New York. The evening before his departure, his mother handed him a small Bible, whispering, "Carry this with you, not only as faith but as a reminder of who you are." Arriving in America was like stepping into another universe. The skyscrapers of New York dwarfed anything he had ever seen. The streets pulsed with energy, and the faces were a blend of every culture imaginable. Yet the promise of America came with its own battles. At Columbia, Kwame stood out not only as an African immigrant but also as someone unafraid to speak boldly. He debated passionately in classrooms and student halls, challenging ideas with confidence and clarity. While some admired his intellect, others dismissed him as an outsider. The sting of prejudice hit hardest during one public debate when a student sneered, "Why don't you go back to Africa and fix your country first?" The words cut deeply, but Kwame refused to bow. He responded with measured fire, arguing that leadership had no borders and that justice, once denied anywhere, weakened humanity everywhere. That night, Professor Harris, an older American academic, approached him and said, "Kwame, you don't just argue, you move people. That's rare. Don't waste it." The professor's words stayed with him, sparking an idea that seemed outrageous at first. What if I could become the President of the United States? He scribbled the thought into his journal, almost embarrassed by its audacity, yet unable to shake it off. Beyond the university walls, Kwame immersed himself in the realities of American life. He volunteered in Harlem and the Bronx, working closely with community leaders who struggled daily against poverty, unemployment, and systemic inequality. In church basements and local offices, he listened more than he spoke, learning the language of survival and resilience in a nation that prided itself on freedom yet often denied it. His ability to connect with African American leaders, Latino activists, and even skeptical local officials made him stand out. "Our stories may begin in different lands," Kwame often told them, "but our struggles and our hopes are bound together." He was no longer just an immigrant student. He was becoming a voice that resonated across lines of race, class, and background. By the time Kwame graduated, whispers of his potential were already spreading among academic and activist circles. He applied for U.S. citizenship, enduring the long, grueling process with the same determination that had carried him across the Atlantic. His financial struggles were real: student loans, low-paying jobs, and endless paperwork. But he carried himself with a sense of purpose that refused to be shaken. Each hardship felt less like an obstacle and more like preparation for something greater. Though no one around him could yet imagine it, Kwame Obiora was laying the foundation for a journey that would take him from the crowded streets of Lagos to the most powerful office in the world. Years had passed since Kwame Obiora first set foot in America. He was no longer the wide-eyed immigrant trying to find his place, but a man tempered by struggle and sharpened by experience. His American citizenship had finally been approved, a moment he described as being born a second time. By now, Kwame had carved out a reputation as a fearless voice in community development, often invited to panels, town halls, and conferences. His speeches carried a rare balance of intellect and authenticity, spoken in a rich accent that reminded audiences of his African roots, yet resonated with the urgency of American realities. Still, the path had not been smooth. He had battled skepticism, professional rejection, and the constant reminder that his identity as a Black African in America made him both visible and vulnerable. Kwame's professional journey led him into the world of policy and governance. He began as an aide to a progressive senator from New York, a role that exposed him to the intricacies of American politics. He drafted policy briefs, studied the legislative process, and learned the brutal reality of compromise. Idealism wins hearts, the senator once told him, but strategy wins wars. Kwame absorbed every lesson, but he also saw how politics could corrode integrity. Corruption, backroom deals, and broken promises disgusted him. Yet, instead of disillusioning him, it fueled his conviction that a different kind of leadership was possible. His colleagues were quick to notice his sharp mind and his ability to bridge divides in meetings where others clashed. He was no longer just the immigrant organizer. He was emerging as a statesman in the making. Several years into this role, Kwame made the bold move to run for a city council seat in New York. Many dismissed his chances outright. An African immigrant with an accent? You'll never win, critics scoffed. But Kwame leaned into his identity rather than hiding it. His campaign slogan, "From Lagos to New York, our struggles are one," became a rallying cry for immigrants, minorities, and working-class citizens. His speeches drew crowds in community centers, union halls, and even subway stations. Against all odds, he won the election, becoming one of the few African-born officials in the city. It was a small office in the grand scale of American politics, but for Kwame, it was proof that the impossible could be rewritten. As a councilman, Kwame proved relentless. He pushed for housing reform, championed immigrant rights, and demanded accountability from city agencies. His boldness earned him both admiration and enemies. Local newspapers began to take notice, describing him as a rising star with global roots. At the same time, whispers grew louder about his ambition. Some accused him of arrogance, claiming he wanted to leap too high, too fast. But Kwame remained undeterred. If ambition is a crime, he once told a skeptical journalist, then America itself is guilty, because ambition built this nation. For every attempt to undermine him, he responded with results. Policies passed, communities empowered, and lives changed. By his early 40s, Kwame was no longer an obscure figure. He had become a national voice, appearing on television panels, delivering keynote addresses at universities, and writing opinion pieces that stirred both praise and controversy. His journey from Lagos to the U.S. political arena was already a story that inspired thousands. Yet Kwame himself saw it only as the beginning. In private moments, he would open his old journal and look at the line he had written years ago. "What if I could become the President of the United States?" What once felt like a dream too large now glimmered as a possibility. Distant, dangerous, but within reach. Kwame's life in New York had settled into a rhythm, but it was never an easy one. Balancing his scholarship studies with the responsibilities of being a council leader left him stretched thin. Yet, amid that storm, he found unexpected warmth. The waitress he had met, Elena, became more than just a friendly face. She became his confidant, his safe harbor. They often talked until late into the night, sharing stories of childhoods shaped by hardship and dreams that sometimes felt unreachable. Elena, like Kwame, worked tirelessly not because life offered her much, but because she was determined to create her own future. Her resilience mirrored his own, and slowly, love began to bloom. It was not sudden or overwhelming. It was steady, gentle, and grounding. For a young man who often felt he was carrying the weight of two worlds, the expectations of his family back in Nigeria and the struggles of leadership in a foreign land, Elena's presence became the quiet strength that reminded him he was not alone. Despite the happiness she brought, Kwame's ambitions didn't rest. His role as a council leader grew more demanding with every passing month. He found himself navigating community disputes, negotiating with older and more experienced members, and addressing issues that ranged from affordable housing to safety concerns. Some of his colleagues respected him, but others whispered behind closed doors, dismissing him as the boy from Nigeria. Their skepticism was sharp, but Kwame refused to be discouraged. Instead, he channeled every ounce of doubt into his work, showing up earlier than others, preparing meticulously, and making sure his voice carried both substance and humility. He listened to the concerns of the people first, speaking only after he understood their needs. Elena reminded him constantly that leadership was not about proving others wrong, but about proving the people right, proving that their trust in him was never misplaced. Slowly, respect began to grow. His persistence became his reputation, and his community started to recognize him not as an outsider, but as someone who belonged because of his service, not his origin. Yet, even as his confidence grew in New York, Kwame's heart often turned toward home. His mother's voice over the phone remained his anchor. Their conversations were more than updates. They were lessons, infused with wisdom. "Remember, my son," she would tell him, "true leadership is about lifting others, not yourself." These words echoed in his mind during long council sessions, during nights when fatigue threatened to pull him down, and during moments when loneliness crept in. He missed home deeply, the warmth of his father's embrace, the familiar laughter of his neighbors, the taste of smoky jollof rice on festive nights, and the rhythm of drums that seemed to keep time with the beating of his heart. But he understood that sacrifice was part of his path. He carried Nigeria within him, not as a burden but as a source of strength. When Elena asked him about his mother, his eyes would light up, and he would speak of her with reverence. To Kwame, she was not just his parent. She was the guiding compass pointing him toward a destiny greater than himself. That destiny began to feel closer when crisis struck. A local housing project faced mass eviction after years of unfair treatment and neglect. Fear and anger swept through the community, and residents packed the council chambers demanding answers. Many leaders hesitated, wary of taking a stand that might cost them political capital, but Kwame could not remain silent. Rising to the podium, he delivered a speech that poured from his heart. His words sharp with truth yet steady with compassion. He spoke of fairness, justice, and the dignity of every family who called that place home. His voice trembled not from fear, but from conviction, and by the end of his address, the room erupted into applause. Local newspapers carried his name the next day, painting him as a rising leader who dared to speak when others faltered. Elena sat in the back row that night, her hands clasped, her eyes filled with tears of pride. She knew this was only the beginning for him, and he began to believe it too. For the first time, Kwame could see the path toward a dream that once felt unreachable. Still, Kwame knew dreams were not built on a single speech or a newspaper headline. His rise would not be sudden. It would be a steady climb, paved by sweat, sacrifice, and sincerity. Love anchored him, his mother's wisdom guided him, and his unwavering belief in a better future drove him. One crisp evening, as he and Elena walked home beneath a blanket of stars, he allowed himself to speak the words he had held back for so long. "One day," he whispered, his voice almost trembling, "I will lead this nation." Elena did not laugh or doubt. She simply nodded, squeezed his hand, and replied, "Then let's start now." That moment became etched in his memory forever, not because of grandeur, but because of its simplicity. In her response, Kwame felt the truth he needed. His dream was not impossible. It was already unfolding, step by step, in the life he was building, in the people he was serving, and in the love that stood beside him. The presidential election season thundered into America like a storm, fierce and consuming. Kwame Obiora, once the scholarship boy from Nigeria and now a seasoned political leader, stood at the center of it all. His campaign rallies shook cities with energy, swelling stadiums and filling town squares with people who saw in him not just a candidate, but a symbol of possibility. His message was clear: a call for unity, justice, and a revival of the American dream that stretched across every community, no matter their background. Yet, his meteoric rise ignited the fury of opposing parties. Rivals mocked his heritage, questioned his right to lead, and wove false scandals to tarnish his image. Ads on television painted him as dangerous. Crowds of detractors shouted at his motorcade, and pundits laughed at the idea of a boy from Nigeria daring to claim the White House. But Kwame did not flinch. He carried himself with a steady dignity, responding to venom with vision, turning every insult into proof of his resilience. Behind the noise, his parents prayed without ceasing, his mother whispering to God each night that her son's destiny was greater than the plots of men. The debates crystallized the nation's tension. Under the hot glare of cameras, Kwame stood flanked by seasoned rivals who wielded both rhetoric and ridicule against him. One opponent sneered openly, declaring that America could not be led by someone born outside its soil. The air grew thick with discomfort, the moderators hesitated, and millions at home leaned in, waiting for Kwame's reply. He inhaled deeply, steadied his voice, and answered with words that echoed across living rooms. America is not defined by the place of birth. It is defined by the courage to believe, the will to serve, and the dream that every citizen carries in their heart. That is what makes us one people. The debate hall erupted, thunderous applause drowning out the sneers. Across the country, his words became a rallying cry. Newspapers the next morning framed his face above the headline, "The Voice of a New America." Though his rivals fumed, Kwame's calm defiance transformed attacks into fuel for his campaign. Where others played the game of politics, he embodied the spirit of leadership. But the path to victory was strewn with shadows. Threats poured into his campaign headquarters, warning him to drop out or face consequences. Angry protesters gathered outside his rallies, holding up signs that called him unfit, shouting slurs that cut deep. Even among his supporters, fear trembled. Was America ready to choose a man with his story, his accent, his roots? Late at night, Kwame wrestled with doubt. The burden weighed heavily, and in moments of silence, he wondered if the dream was too large. Yet Elena never wavered. She held his hand through sleepless nights, her voice steady. "The darker the night, the brighter your light will shine." Back in Nigeria, his parents prayed harder, their small living room echoing with whispered intercessions. "Lord," his mother cried, "protect him from those who hate the light." These prayers became Kwame's armor. Each time he walked onto a stage, greeted by thousands waving flags and chanting his name, he remembered his parents' faith, and he found the strength to keep moving forward. Election day arrived like a storm's climax. Across the nation, millions lined up before dawn to cast their votes, braving long waits and icy winds. Newsrooms buzzed with predictions, analysts debated outcomes, and Kwame's opponents projected confidence. As results trickled in, the night grew tense. Screens flashed with shifting numbers, showing him behind in some states and ahead in others. His headquarters brimmed with restless supporters, their eyes glued to giant projectors. Kwame, however, sat quietly in a back room with Elena's hand in his, and his parents' faces on a video call. Hours dragged like days until, at last, the decisive states turned in his favor. The final projection lit up the screen. Kwame Obiora had secured the majority of votes. The hall erupted, cheers, tears, chants of his name echoing into the night. His parents, thousands of miles away, fell to their knees weeping, thanking God for answering their prayers. Stepping onto the stage, confetti falling, Kwame raised his hands and declared, "This victory is not mine. It belongs to every child told their dream was too big, to every voice silenced, to every hand that never stopped reaching upward. Together, we are America." The morning after the election, the world woke to history. Every headline carried his name, every channel replayed his speech, and every nation whispered of the remarkable journey of a young man from Nigeria who had risen to lead the most powerful nation on earth. Yet in his heart, Kwame remained grounded. He spent his first quiet hours of triumph in reflection, calling his parents to hear their tears of joy, thanking Elena for standing through the storms, and whispering a prayer of gratitude himself. Then, as dawn bathed the White House lawn in gold, he stood at its gates, not as a dreamer anymore, but as the President-elect of the United States of America. The journey that began in a small Nigerian home had culminated in victory across oceans and borders. His story was no longer just his own. It was a testament to faith, resilience, and the belief that no obstacle was too great when love, prayer, and unyielding courage walked alongside you. And as the nation prepared for his inauguration, Kwame Obiora smiled and whispered, "This is only the beginning." Kwame Obiora's triumph was crowned not only with political honor but with love fulfilled. He married Elena in a ceremony that blended quiet intimacy with national pride, a union admired by citizens who had followed their journey. Together, they stood as symbols of perseverance and devotion, partners not only in marriage but in the mission to serve a nation. Their story showed that love and resilience could walk hand in hand into history. For his parents, life transformed in ways they had once only dreamed. Invited to the United States, they boarded a plane for the first time in their lives, welcomed with honor as the parents of a president. From their small Nigerian village to the grand halls of Washington, they witnessed firsthand the world their son had shaped, their prayers answered beyond imagination. Yet Kwame did not stop there. He used his influence to strengthen ties between America and Africa, opening opportunities for students and entrepreneurs. His leadership extended beyond borders, rooted in humility and vision. In this, his story became more than history. It became a bridge of hope, reminding the world that no dream is too distant when faith, family, and courage lead the way.